Welcome everyone to our LinkedIn Live today. I am here with Karen from True You Career Coaching. I'm so excited to be doing this today. We're going to be talking about how to gain 10 plus hours back in your week. And the secret is not simple productivity tools. So excited to be doing this with you. Everyone, pop in the comments where you are from. Good to see you, Shelby. Tell us where you are in the world and where you what you are hoping to gain from our LinkedIn Live today. And feel free to pop in questions in the comments as well. We are happy to answer questions and also, share your tips if you found something that's been effective for you in gaining time back into your week. So we are here to talk about this important topic because both Karin and I have found that what has helped us more than anything else has been confidence in gaining back so much time. And we're going to be talking about specific tactics that you can start implementing and what that looks like specifically, what specific things you can start doing. Karin, please tell us a little bit about yourself before we dive in.
Sure. Thanks so much, Lori. I'm glad that we're back on here in a joint LinkedIn Live. It's been about a year. That's awesome.
Yes.
Hello, Shelby. Good to see you again. So about me, let's see. My background is in nonprofit sector, and where I also most recently was a program director, we'll say, and my gosh, learned incredible amounts through that position, and also it really helped me see that I wanted to go in a different path, in this path of coaching. And I started with career coaching, and now I do career and leadership coaching through True You coaching. And I think this topic is really interesting because I remember as a director, my manager sitting down with me and saying, like, offering me a productivity tool, not giving me the direct feedback per se that whatever was happening. I mean, I guess I was probably behind in my work because honestly, I was always drowning, always. But giving me this, like, the urgency importance matrix. Are we familiar with that out there? The urgency
Yeah,
importance
I
matrix.
think the Eisenhower or Ebbinghaus matrix, like do
Yeah, and
it now, delegate it, do it,
yeah,
like schedule it. Yeah.
yes. So it helps you. It's theoretically helps you like figure out what to do when.
Yeah.
And it was just like, this is not the thing that was going to help me at that time. It's a good matrix, don't get me wrong. It can be a very good organizational tool. However, it was just not the thing that was going to help me at that time, because
Yeah.
what was actually happening was that I was going through a ton of imposter syndrome. I did not feel confident in what I was doing, in leading my team, in being an organizational leader. And that was leading to me to doing all kinds of being a yes woman, just saying yes a lot to a lot of things, even if it didn't make sense, just so I could to like overcome these feelings of imposter syndrome and perfectionism that were like
Yeah.
going on, and people pleasing that were going on in my head. And so I'm excited about today's topic, uh, just because I think it's an interesting way to think about gaining back time in your week.
Yeah, absolutely. Good to see you, Irene. Thanks so much for joining us. Watching whilst having a break. Amazing. Um, what I really loved about this topic is that it's very a non-traditional way of taking back your time.
Mhm.
What really inspired this for me was that I had a client recently who I was speaking to about feedback that she was receiving, and she was being told, you need to be more assertive in meetings because we're going way over time, like
Mm.
30 minutes over, right? And if you're doing two meetings a day that each go 30 minutes over, right, that's an extra hour per day. Or if you have four meetings and each of them go over 20 minutes or 30 minutes, so much adds up. And she's only getting her kids are little, so they go to bed early. She's only getting like 10 minutes, or not 10 minutes, 2 hours with her kids because she gets off work at 6 or sometimes 6:30, and then they head off to bed. And so when I was talking to you about potential topics we were discussing, and how I was telling her, like, what you need is to be more, like her boss said, being more assertive. And she just didn't know how to do that and how to take control of meetings without being seen as overly bossy, right? But she's getting like a direct directive from her boss to do this. And so it was super important. So I went over specific tactics and nonverbal cues that she could use to take back control when things had gone a completely different direction than they should have. The first one is pretty obvious. It's an agenda, right? And just knowing what is going to be on the agenda ahead of time and reinforcing that at the beginning, like, this is our agenda for this meeting. So everyone knows, right? You're doing what's called preventative flagging. So you're letting everyone know that these are each of the specific things. And so when you get off track, you can say, okay, let's get back to the agenda. Like, let's get back to our topic. So that was just one really simple thing, but there's so much more too, that we can do in meetings. But one of my other and I can dive into that a little bit more, but one of my other favorites that come to mind immediately is setting a precedent early on in your relationships at work that you don't respond to messages after hours. Because if you do respond to messages after hours, then they'll continue to expect you to. If you don't, then they won't expect you to. But when you start to do that, then they'll be like, well, why didn't you respond? Why didn't you respond? Because you're creating a certain expectation, and it can be self-sabotaging or self-helping. And you need to know what it is that you want and what steps to take to get there. So if work-life balance is essential for you, if you don't want to be replying after hours, doing work after hours, then it's so essential to control what you have control of. And that's when you reply.
Absolutely. And like what you're really, I'm just going to name the word, is boundaries, right?
Yes, yes.
having setting boundaries for your work time, for yourself, and for others. So how you will allow work to, or will not allow work to bleed into other, like outside of work time,
Yes.
and how you will allow others to treat you, how you will setting boundaries around, you know, what you'll accept and what you won't accept. And I think that that's such a huge key, because, and even actually an agenda is, it's like a formal boundary that everybody has in front of them, right? Where it's like, this is what we're doing right now. Yeah. And now you always can refer back to it. So I think the boundaries goes back to exactly what you said earlier. It takes confidence sometimes to set the boundary, and like that self-confidence and self-esteem that it's okay to set that boundary. Because I think so often the reason that and we're all different, but I know for me personally, one of the reasons that I was spending, just wearing my work hours like a badge of honor as a defense mechanism for the fact I was working way too many hours, was because I wasn't setting boundaries with others around my time very specifically. And it had a lot to do in my case with people pleasing, which, you know, is not everybody, that doesn't apply to everybody, but for some of us, and this case was just constantly trying to please people as a way to make myself feel like I was competent, or make me think that others would think that I was competent, which is a lot of mental gymnastics, I recognize.
It is, and it's so exhausting. Yes. Yeah. Remembering that our need to be respected is more important than our need to be liked can be incredibly redirecting and empowering. It tells us, wait, is what I'm doing right now trying to get people to like me? Like, is that what my action right here, is that my goal here? Or is it to ensure that I'm achieving the desired outcome for whatever goal you have, right? Work-life balance, being able to own what and have control over whatever it is that you should normally reasonably have control over, like your time outside of work. So yeah, makes a huge difference. The other tips that come to mind when it comes to meetings is hand gestures. So there are um, specific gestures that you can use to help people recognize that, oh, I have something to say. Oh, I need to interrupt, like respectfully. So one of them is just like a 45-degree hand, just like this, like kind of like you're raising your hand, but it's subtle enough that people aren't like turned off by it because it's not this, right? And it's not a stop sign either, right? This means stop. It's a subtle hand gesture that communicates pause, stop. So it's more like pause instead of just completely stop. And it's a gentle way of doing it. So it's subtle. So there's like tiers of assertiveness with your hand gestures that you can use that helps you take control and be assertive when in ways that people may not be recognizing as someone's taking back control because they're just so subtle and not they're less direct than words that you might use. So that's one of them that I really love. The other one is using your finger like this and then like moving forward to say, I'm interested in what you're saying, but I have something to say as well. And then being able to open your mouth a little bit. That's called the fish. So if you open your mouth a little, it communicates that, oh, I have something to say. I have something to say. Right. And so doing those small little gestures, and even in big meetings when there's 10 plus people, seeing those gestures, people have learned what that means throughout their life. And as a result, most people will take the cue and recognize that, oh, Ariana, what were you going to say? Or they'll pause or end their thought, and then you'll be able to start talking. So just a couple things that can help you take control, be more assertive, and help you save a considerable amount of time. And you can even say things like, I've noticed we've kind of got on topic. Let's go back to whatever's on the agenda. So use that preventative flagging, have that agenda. And when it comes to the agenda, naturally people need to take notes. Just because if you are a woman and you are the one who made the agenda, doesn't mean you have to be the one taking notes all the time. Ask someone else to do it. Or if you're not in the leadership position, you can ask your boss, like, hey, I would really appreciate it if this responsibility was, taken around the table and everyone did this part, and we had a rotating assignment. So a couple things that you can do there to save a considerable amount of time. That takes confidence. That's the tool that you need to be able to own your power and say, what's happening right now isn't okay, and I'm going to bring it back to where it needs to be.
So I think it's a really good point. And I've definitely used the mouth thing. I tend to do the mouth thing automatically. And then I find that other people are like, oh, Karin, did you have something to say? And then I realize I feel like I interrupted them. People pleasing. It's coming back. It'll come back up. It's a pattern for me that I'm
Well, it's a respectful way to interrupt because you're not cutting them off. You're not, saying that what they have to say doesn't matter. It's a cue to say, okay, and some people are long-winded, right? And so you might have to use those cues more often. But yeah, it's something that you've learned that helps you to say what you need to. And you shouldn't feel guilty that I have something to say. What you have to say matters, and we have to be assertive enough for our voice to be heard.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking a little bit too, just to add one more piece onto this about meetings very specifically, is that it's kind of different if you are the facilitator versus if you're not the facilitator.
Yeah.
And so a lot of, like, if you're the facilitator, it's at your responsibility to be keeping the meetings on track because it is not just your time, it's everybody's time, right? And so the tools that you just suggested are really excellent. And I think, and another one that I personally use when I'm facilitating a lot, but I also use when I'm not facilitating, is a reference to the clock. So if you're facilitating, obviously you could just say, okay, well, we have 15 more minutes, and then, whatever. But if you're not facilitating, you can still, like you just said it, Lori, own some of your power by, when you do go to speak up, if you know that this is a meeting that tends to go over, or that facilitator tends to not keep us on task, when you go to speak up, say, okay, I know we have 14 minutes left, so I just wanted to share this final thought on this topic, or whatever it might be. And you can kind of use some of that language when you're sharing whatever that idea is as well. Because you're not trying to take control of facilitation. You're actually aiding the facilitator and making sure that everybody at the table understands, including the facilitator, how much time there is left, and that it's that it's important to you, at least, that we all are respecting that and noticing that.
Yeah, I love the final thought, that cue of final, like, we're done talking about this. And then, like, you can just mention, like, our next agenda item, right? Or whatever. Like, you don't have to say it like that, but or you can just say, so what about, and then whatever the next agenda item is, like, moving on. And I love the time cue as well. That's so good.
Of course, all this is contextual. I just want to name that. I know people might be listening to be like, I could not say that in this environment. I respect that.
It depends on culture. It really does.
It does. But there are ways for you to own your power, even if you're not the facilitator in that setting. So just know that that's something that you can look for little subtle ways to do that while still respecting the hierarchy of the room, I guess.
Yeah. One of the mistakes that I sometimes see people make is when they're trying to save time. Whereas if you're trying to get more information out of a person, if you do a slow triple nod like this, people tend to talk. I can't remember the specific percentage amount, but they talk more, because it says, I agree, keep talking, keep talking. Whereas if you do a head nod, like as long as you're not like doing a negative facial expression, like you still and you're engaged with like a head tilt, for example, then that communicates like, okay, I get it, you can finish up now. And so, but when like, right, that's like very negative facial expression. So you don't want to do that, because then it communicates, I don't want to hear what you have to say. What you say doesn't matter, just be quiet. So there's a little bit of nuance there with how you do it. So the speed of the nod, and making sure that the facial expression is positive or negative, just being aware of those things. So if you are trying to get more information out of a person, maybe you're in a negotiation or something like that, then the slow triple nod is great. And if you're wanting less, then a fast triple nod is good. So these are things that we've learned from a young age. That's why I teach these nonverbal cues, because people know them very well. It's just subconscious, just things we've learned.
That's really a good point. That's interesting. I hadn't heard that one before, but I can absolutely see what the difference would be.
Yeah, it does. It makes a difference. I'm looking at the other notes that I made about what I've done to set boundaries. One of the other ones is turning off notifications. I don't have email notifications on my phone. I have the app, so if I want to, I can look at my email, but I do not have those notifications on. I only have notifications on my phone for texting and like some other things. If I'm working one-on-one with a client, then sometimes they'll have my phone number, or I'll work with them through a different app. And there's a certain level of urgency depending on the project we're working on. For example, if they get an interview, because I'm a career coach, then we need to schedule an interview prep session, typically fairly quickly, because they'll have that interview coming up soon. So if that is the case, then I want them to be able to reach me quickly. And I don't check my email nearly as often as I do my texts or other apps. And so having that control, because you have control over whatever apps you want to use, and you have total control over notifications. So being able to know what those are and using them to your full advantage, and turning off notifications on your desktop or laptop too. If you constantly have email notifications just coming up and coming up and coming up, or whatever other notifications you have, they are so distracting. If you can just
Mhm.
hyper focus for a while on one thing, you're going to be so much more productive.
Absolutely, and I think setting those boundaries around your phone are so important. In my business, I started using WhatsApp for working with clients, and I realized I use WhatsApp for personal reasons, and so I started using a completely different app, like communication app for client things, just so my business was separated out, so there was a boundary between my
Yeah.
business and my personal life. Just and I can still check that app whenever I want to, but if I'm not checking that app and I don't have to also not check my personal stuff. So I think that's a
Mhm.
really good point. And then the notifications and just being like, nope, sorry, work, you don't get to be on my in my pocket at 11 p.m. or whatever.
Yeah.
That's I think is super, super important.
Mhm, mhm. And at the same time, sometimes you want kind of both of those in a way, because like, I use Calendly for people to schedule,
Mhm.
but it goes onto my personal email calendar because I need all of that together to know when my daughter's appointments are, other appointments that I have, work and work meetings and coaching sessions, all of those things, right? But people don't have access to it. It just all is in one place so I can be organized. So
Right.
yeah, all of those, and that's one productivity tool that you can use. But ultimately, it's a boundary in the first place.
Yeah.
That's what it is in the first place. One of the other things that I learned from Sammy, I think her last name is pronounced Euro or Eura, and she works at Nike and is director of marketing. She talks about work-life balance and having and being a mom, being a parent, and helping organizations and individuals to help achieve that work-life balance as a parent. And one of her strategies is when she is out of town, her auto reply will say when she'll be back in the office. And if this needs my attention when I get back, please schedule this to go out that morning when I get back, because it's not realistic to expect anyone to reply to 100 plus emails when they get back in the office. And
Oh,
then when you're on vacation or PTO, whatever you're utilizing your time off for, then you're stressing about all the work that you have to catch up on, right? Naturally, there are projects sometimes that we have to catch up on, but we don't necessarily have to reply to every single Slack message and every single email that we received while we were out. It's simply unrealistic. And having that boundary for yourself, so much relief. And you take back so much control over your time. So I
yeah.
absolutely love that tip from her. I love that she does that. And again, it depends on culture. All right. So some
Mhm.
organizations, some
Right.
bosses are going to be, okay with that, and others might not. But trying it out, right? You never know unless you ask, right? You
Right.
don't get something unless you ask for it. If you get feedback saying like, "Hey, that's not okay." Yeah, maybe that's your boss, or that's the culture that you're in. Okay. But why not try it in the first place? Unless you already know ahead of time that it just won't fly. Just really good tip that I absolutely loved when I read that post of hers.
It's fantastic. Jillian just shared in the comments about setting up rules in Outlook for certain emails to automatically move to a folder so as
Yes,
to
I
not
love
get
that.
overwhelmed or spend time organizing. I will admit I have definitely been on vacation and checked my email like a few times during the week just to
Yeah,
delete all of the things that did not actually need my
matter.
response. But I didn't, I mean, or that, yeah, that didn't matter or didn't, by the time I got back, it wasn't going to matter anyway. So
Mhm.
I love this idea though of setting up rules in Outlook. Really using Outlook has a lot of features in it that can really really help with
Yeah.
your own boundaries that you're looking to set. So it's a great one. Thank you so much for sharing that, Jillian.
Yeah, it is a really awesome tool, and it's all automated. Like, set
Yeah.
up the rule, and it can be by person, it can be by topic, so many different automations that you can use there. So then when you do get back, you're more focused on what really matters.
Or if you time block, that's that's a tool, but like, or productivity tool. But if you are a time blocker, then, which never worked for me, but maybe it was the environment I was in, or maybe it's just the way my mind worked. But if you time block, it can, I mean, that can help you so much, just to like go to that folder and know that this is the person or this is the topic that I need to focus on right now.
Yeah.
I w-
I'll schedule
before
time on
we
my sorry, go ahead.
It's okay. Well, I wanted to definitely touch also on boundaries around, like, what if part of the problem is that there's just too many meetings? And
Right.
how do we start saying no to things so that we're gaining back time? And because we know if something is worth our time and being there, or if it's just really, we were invited into this thing, but it really has like very little to do with us. People just want our insight or something, but really it's not even our like our workflow.
Mhm.
And so I know one of the things that often would happen for me is, and so if this resonates for anybody, let me know, is I just felt like I couldn't say no. And again, I mentioned earlier, I was experiencing a lot of imposter syndrome at the time. And so my calendar, I mean, I would be in 6 hours of meetings a day, like very little time to actually do work. Sometimes more, there were days where I'd be in like 7 hour, like my entire day was meetings. And then it would
Yeah.
be like, and now I have a million to dos, and I look at tomorrow and it looks almost the same. And so I
Mhm.
think something that I've learned recently. So one of the things that would go through my head is I'd be like, that meeting, like, really, do I really need to be in that meeting? Like, why? You know what I mean? But then I look at who else is in that meeting. And I'm like, oh, like, oh, but the ED is going to be there. So maybe, they must really need me there. Or I don't, they didn't.
Right.
But anyway. And so I would say, well, I can't say no to the ED, or, the power dynamics come in, and then my brain just goes spirally. And so my brain would just think like, I can't say no to that. Oh, I guess I'll have to, like, maybe I can like I'll just work through my lunch, So now I'm just adding more hours into my day. I'll arrive early tomorrow. I'll stay late, whatever.
Oh my
And
gosh, yeah.
so yeah, and I'm sure that many people can resonate or like relate to that spiral, and how we end up kind of having a workaholic way of going to work without
Mhm.
even, not, it's not intentional, it just like builds up over time. So something that I learned about saying no, which is really what it comes down to with boundaries a lot of times, is just saying no, saying, actually, I can't take on that task that you're asking me to take on, which is a tricky thing to say to your manager sometimes. And maybe you
Mhm.
don't say it quite so directly, maybe you say it in a different way. But oh, Jillian, you too. Okay, thank you. I know that we can resonate with this. So, but I think something that I learned is a lot of times what happens for me is that the spiral begins in my head, and I start making up stories and telling myself stories about why I can't say no. And this is very different from any of the tools we've talked about, but actually bringing yourself back to the present moment and
Mhm.
using like a little bit of mindfulness to just calm the chatter in the brain can help us gain perspective and say, wait, well, actually, I have really good reason why this does not make sense for me to be in that meeting.
Yeah.
And instead of worrying about what the perception might be, or like, well, the ED is going to be there, I couldn't say no. It might be, instead, you bring yourself back to the present moment with just a little bit of focus on, if you focus on one of your senses, just for even 30 seconds, just take a few deep breaths, bring yourself back to the present moment and say, no, but I actually have a really legitimate reason why this doesn't make sense for me and what I need to be doing with my time instead. And then present that case.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times we really do, you really do have work that you need to be doing. And if a meeting is simply, it doesn't make sense for you, then if you can present that case, explain what you'll be doing instead, a lot of times people are like, okay, cool, yeah, we'll make sure you get the notes. Like,
Mhm.
we think that we can't say no when in fact we absolutely can. And if we just simply explain why, most of the time people are like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But it's about
Yeah.
explaining why and making sure it's clear.
Yeah. Agreed.
Irene just shared too. I'm struggling to articulate the excessive workload without deflating the energy in the room.
Yeah. 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 Um, maybe those are two separate things. So articulating your excessive workload might be like a one-on-one conversation with your boss, um, and making sure there's still energy in a meeting, for example, with lots of people. So I would suggest having that conversation with your supervisor about your workload, and then still creating that energy in meetings, but using some of those tips and techniques that we talked about early on about taking control of a meeting and still, respecting what other people have to say and liking what they have, and encouraging them to use their voice, just making sure that things still stay on track. That's what I would suggest there. And, just because you're wanting to shorten meetings and take control of that doesn't mean that you're automatically going to be decreasing the energy in the room. It just means you're staying on track, you're owning your power. A lot of the time we automatically think if it's something that we believe it's something that people won't like, that there will be a negative outcome, but so frequently it's in our head,
Yeah,
really.
exactly. And Irene, and I'm not sure, Irene, if this applies, but I think also being able to say, and sometimes in a meeting, I recognize it happens fast and you're kind of put on the spot. But if you can take a moment, even just buy yourself some time and say, you know what? I'm open to what you're asking, but I really need to think through what the next couple weeks look like for me. So can I get back to you with a concrete answer?
Yeah, saying you have to check your calendar
I have
for
to check my
whatever it
calendar.
is they're asking about, whether it's a work meeting, personal commitment, whatever it is, that enables you to go back later and take control and decide what you want to do with your time 100%. We are over time and I have another meeting to be to. But thank you everyone who participated. Thank you for your questions and comments. We always love all that energy that comes in. Thank you so much, Karin, for doing this with me. It's so lovely to do this with you again. Almost a year on the dot doing another
Yeah.
live with you. So for anyone who is interested in owning their confidence, helping you achieve better work-life balance, if you are interested in working with either of us, please feel free to send us a DM, or comment for me. If you are interested in having a free confidence coaching call, type in the comments career and I will send you a DM to schedule with me. Karin, is there anything you want to share before we part?
Yes. So similarly, if you are a woman in leadership who is kind of feeling that struggle, whether it would be with work-life balance or imposter syndrome, I would love to support you in understanding more about the sabotaging thoughts you might be having and how you can move beyond those. And I do offer free leadership audits. So you can drop on my LinkedIn, drop me a comment on my stream of this, and I can get you set up with that. And also, if we're not connected, send me a connection request. I'd love to
Yeah,
connect.
same here. Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. Once again, we will see you all on LinkedIn. Have a fabulous week.